Today is November the 20th, 2023. This is Parshat Vayetzei. Parshat Vayetzei starts with Jacob running away from his brother and running away from his parents. We have important scenes at the beginning of the Parsha, which we're not going to go into. The scenes of the dream and things relating to that. And we're going to just go into the scene where he meets Rachel. I'm going to focus this class on the character of Rachel, what is stated and what is not stated, and how I think it's really what we're going to learn here is, as usual, how to read something closely to see what the Torah is saying as it relates the story, how the Torah relates the story, and how we can figure out a portrait of Rachel, or what kind of portrait we are going to get of this extraordinary person. I suppose in the favorite matriarch category, Rebecca is the favorite. I'm saying this because Rebecca is pretty forthright, independent, and has an archetype of a strong, independent woman. I mean, all of these are debatable, of course. You could say the same thing about Sarah. Could you say the same thing about Rachel and Leah? And what would you say about those two? And why those two are, or what their character portraits are? But we're going to focus on Rachel. So I'm going to pull up the text here, and we're gonna just start the text from verse 4 in the which is right here. Here we go. So we just fast forward. He's made his journey to Haran. He is somewhere outside the well. He's just about to see the well, and he sees these people at the well, and you recall that they're all waiting for everyone to get there in order to take the rock off of the well. And in the past, we've looked at that scene and asked what was going on there. Why are they waiting? And I think a good, honest theory of this is that they're all suspicious of each other, and so they all want to wait till they get there so that they can have an orderly distribution of a limited resource. And so there's a lot of suspicion there, and this is enhanced by the fact that Lavan is a we'll discover is a conniving personality. We already got a hint of his interest in wealth in the previous story with Rebecca, where he was so excited about the arrival of Abraham's servant loaded with loot. And that is what enticed Lavan. And you recall in that scene, I mentioned that, Bethuel, the father, has his honor, and in agreeing to allow Rebecca to marry, he doesn't go into a further negotiation, but it's the mother and Lavan, that is Rebecca's sister, that want to, prolong Rebecca's stay in Haran, and in order to, I think, extract more from the servant. And the servant, as I mentioned in that story, is very, very clever. So here is Yaakov. He's returning to the place where this all happened. And what we're filling in, just in our imaginations, is that he must have grown up with some story. We project onto, the family scene that where did I come from, and where did you come from, and what's your story, and where did you how a parent relates the how I met my mother story. We're assuming that is a conversation that every family has. Why I should assume that, I don't know, but it's a conversation that is part of a family lore. And so part of the family lore would be how I met your mother, or the fact that your mother comes from a distant country, or you don't have any relatives here for this reason. The reason is that they live very far away. Everybody you know may have cousins. You have no cousins. You have no grandparents. You have nothing. You only have the two parents, and maybe the father, Abraham, who's still alive, for 16 years, etc. So there is some lore here, and Jacob is emerging in the same locale as Rebecca and the well, and he sees these shepherds hovering at the well who are kind of jostling for their position and in competition with each other. So this is Yaakov saying to them, Achai, brothers, me'ayin, where are you from? Right? And it's such a great opener, which is, I see you, I call you brothers because I want to endear myself to you. Vayomru, they say, we're from Haran. Okay, so they're pretty blunt and curt with him. Vayomer lehem, he said to them, Hayadatem et Lavan ben Nachor? Vayomer, Vayomru, Yadanu. Do you know Lavan, son of Nachor? Yeah, we know him. So they're curt with him. Vayomer lehem, Ashalom lo? They said, is it well with him? Vayomer shalom. They said, yes. V'nei Rachel bito ba imatzon. And here is Rachel, his daughter, with the sheep. We'll talk about that in a second. I want to focus on that verse in a second. He said, Henot hayom gadol. Indeed, it's still broad daylight. It is not time to gather in the livestock. So give the sheep to drink and go back, tend them. And then they said, we cannot until all the herds have been gathered. Only then do they roll the stone from the mouth of the well, and we give the sheep to drink. So, in other words, you interloper, you foreigner, don't make your rules for us. We have our rules here. We have our way of doing things here. Thank you very much, okay? Don't impose your own sense of what you need to do here because we have what to do, okay? While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with the sheep that were her father's, for she was a shepherdess. Now it was when Yaakov saw Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother, that Yaakov came close. He rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and gave drink to the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother. Nice, big, fat, juicy verse. Okay, we'll talk about that. And Yaakov kissed Rachel, lifted up his voice, and wept. And Yaakov told Rachel that he was her father's brother, that he was Rivka's son. She ran and told her father. Now it was, soon as Lavan heard the tidings concerning Yaakov, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him into his house. And he recounted all these events to Lavan. Lavan said to him, without doubt, you are bone, my flesh. And he stayed with him, renewing of the moon. Lavan said to Yaakov, because you are my brother, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Lavan had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. And Yaakov fell in love with Rachel. He said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Lavan said, my giving her to you is better than my giving her to another man. Stay with me. So Yaakov served 7 years for Rachel, yet they were in his eyes as but a few days because of his love for her. And Yaakov said to Lavan, come now, give me my wife, for my days of labor have been fulfilled, so that I may come into her. Lavan gathered all the people of the place together and made a drink fest. Now in the evening, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he came into her. Lavan also gave her Zilpah his maid, for Leah is his daughter, as a maid. Now in the morning, here, she was Leah. He said to Lavan, what now have you done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me? Lavan said, such is not done in our place, giving away the younger before the firstborn. Fill out the bridal week for this one, and we shall give you that one also, for the service which you will serve me for yet another 7 years. Yaakov did so. He fulfilled the bridal week for this one, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, as a wife. And Lavan also gave Rachel, his daughter, Bilhah, his maid, for her as a maid. So he came into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel also, more than Leah. Then he served him for yet another 7 years. God saw that Leah was hated, so he opened her womb, while Rachel was barren. Okay, so that's the story. I have to say, just reading it again is we've read the story dozens of times throughout the course of our lives, and you read another story another time, you go, oh, how could he? How dare? How? It's so astonishing, and yet, we have this implicit understanding of the possibility that this is possible, that it's possible in a world where there are certain proprieties, there's certain kinds of vulnerabilities and power of certain characters over others, that anything can happen, and it shouldn't surprise us so much. And look, crazy, surprising things happen all the time. I wonder what someone would say if they were to time travel to our era and see the kinds of crazy things that happen in our era, and even in the microscopic granular detail of families. Anyway, just before we go into some close looking at the verses, just your initial reactions. Go ahead. I'm going to allow you to just relate. Go ahead, Nanette.
Okay, so hey, Rabbi. I mean, is this the first? I could be wrong. Is this the first time we're reading about the word love?
No.
I mean, with Rebecca and Esau,
Yes.
Isaac, right? I mean, it was like she was perfect because she was from the tribe. Abraham and Sarah. They're the mother, the founding father, mother.
Right.
But this is the first word. This is the first love.
No, it's not. The first love is actually the love of a father to a son, Asher Ahavta, Abraham to Isaac. But we have a spousal love with Isaac and Rebecca. That's already indicated in the previous story. And we have parental love with Rebecca to Jacob and Isaac to Esau. So this would be the second example of a spousal love, or at least in this case, it's pre-spousal. The contrast with Isaac and Rebecca is that Isaac marries her, and then the text says he loves her. Here, Jacob loves her, and then he marries her. So there's a bit of an inversion here, but it's a good point. Yes. Okay. Any other reactions to the story as it unfolded here? Okay. So go ahead, Barbara.
I find it just incredible that when they made the arrangement, Lavan doesn't say to him, we marry our oldest first, or that somebody along the way didn't clue him in to the fact that this was the tradition of the community. After all, they told him the tradition of the well. So, and he's there for enough time. It just seems absolutely bizarre to me that he wasn't smart enough to know what was going to happen to him.
So isn't that interesting? It's such a great observation, and it only gives us a little more texture to the handicaps that Jacob is under, that he is really vulnerable to the manipulations of everybody, and that he's alone. You know, when we imagine the scene, we imagine that there are lots of people around, and that he has to encounter all of these shepherds on a regular basis. I mean, they do have these rules around the well. So we have that initial scene where they're all at the well, and he's been working in the area for 7 years now, and nobody talks to him. Nobody says, oh, Jacob, you're working for that real conniver, Lavan. He is all, nobody ever tips him off. At least the text is not concerned with this kind of elaboration, and quite literally, Jacob is in the dark. I mean, very literal. He is in the dark as to who it is that he is going to marry. And this, I mean, the other questions that seem beyond just credulity is, oh, come on, how could this have happened? How could this have happened that he went to bed with, a woman that he didn't, and he woke up next to the woman that he didn't marry, that he thought he was going to marry? Could he have been that blind, or that drunk, or that, so, there are midrashim that really try to flesh out this story, that in fact that he may have had too much to drink, or in fact that Rachel was mimicking, or Rachel conveyed all of the code, the secret codes of their relationship to Leah in out of compassion to Leah, because Rachel understood this as well, and that will bring us to the point that we're going to make here, which is that in this, up until this moment, up until right now, Rachel hasn't said a word. Okay, but go ahead, Bob.
The one thing that struck me, it seemed rather forward of Jacob to go up and kiss Rachel, meeting her for the first time, right up front.
Yes, isn't it? And that only tells you that Jacob, there's a bit of impulsivity going on here, both among Jacob and in all the characters, except for Leah. Leah is really not defined in any impulsive way yet. But and we have hovering over this the memory of a certain other impulsive character, namely Esav. Esav was the one who always acted under impulse, and so that residue is still very much there in the way that these characters behave. Okay, all right, let's go on. I want to read closely now, focusing on the character of Rachel. Okay, and what how Rachel makes an entrance. Okay, going back to the scene where she's at the well, and they say to him, "Hashalom lo, vayomer shalom." So I think I'm the only person who reads this. I've read dozens of commentaries and translations of this. There's a gruffness between the other shepherds and Jacob. Jacob is a foreigner, and they're suspicious of him, so they don't give him the time of day, quite literally. So in the exchange, if I were directing this play here, this scene, I would do it as follows, which is, they say, everything, is he well with it? Is it well with them? They said, is it well? Now, all the translators make, here comes Rachel, his daughter, with the sheep. They put that line in the mouths of the shepherds, but it could easily be in the mouth of the narrator. There's, in my opinion, there's an ambiguity as to who's saying this, right? They say, Jacob says, everything okay with him? Yeah, it's okay. And the storyteller is saying, and now everybody, look who's coming. It's Rachel. Okay. And the reason why I have the narrator saying this is because, the next line is just the next line. Odenu midaberima v'Rachel ba'a, she is coming. Imatzon asher lavia kira'ahi. He's still speaking with them, and Rachel came with the sheep that were his father. So they don't stop talking. Okay, if it was in fact them saying to Jacob, "Yeah, she's coming," he would have stopped, and he would have looked at her, and he would have paid attention to her. But I believe I want to make a strong case for this, even though everybody disagrees with me, or I've been disagreeing with everybody, that it's they're saying this, and she is coming along to the well, and Jacob's still talking to these people. All right. So we don't know, the only thing we know about Rachel here, I'll leave the debate aside because it's my little problem. Unless anybody wants to chime in here. Okay. I have a portrait of these other shepherds as boors, basically, and as people who really don't like outsiders and don't want to give him the time of day. And I have an idea of storytelling that the narrator is trying to, do the narrative art, is the storyteller's art, which is, look, v'hinei, Rachel bito ba'im matzon, which is, in my experience as a storyteller, you're always trying to keep the audience, and the v'hinei is a way of holding the audience. Okay, so that's my opinion, but leave it as it is. What do we know about Rachel now? Well, we know that she's a shepherdess. We know that she's her father's daughter. And I can't resist the beautiful onomatopoeia here when it says, Verachel ba'a imatzon, okay, which is the sound that sheep makes. Ba, Rachel ba imatzon, okay? I'm not the only one that points this out, that Rachel came with the sheep is Rachel ba imatzon. She's the sheep are making all sorts of noise because she's a shepherdess. So we now know that she's a shepherdess. We don't know that she's beautiful yet, but we do know that, and we have the sense that, well, we've encountered another shepherdess, which is Rebecca, her aunt, Isn't that interesting that in this family of Lavan, we have women who are tending sheep. It's quite unusual, I suppose. So this is my justification for it's the narrator. So what does it signal to us? It signals to us that there's something interesting about her, that shepherds are personalities. The shepherd as a paradigm, as an archetype, as a character, the shepherd signals a certain kind of independence, as opposed to the person who is a farmer of someone who seeds a field. Let me just stop sharing for a second on this point. You can be a shepherd and you can be alone as a shepherd.
Having trouble with my computers here.
Okay, sorry.
I hear that.
Hang on, sorry. So we always have a romantic picture of shepherds. They're by themselves, but in the Bible, the shepherd idea is really an independent idea, a model of independence. The best illustration of this is when the brothers go down to Egypt, and Pharaoh says, "What is your profession?" Joseph warns them and says, "Don't tell them that you're shepherds. Don't tell them that, because they don't like that." and it's not because they think that this is a disgusting profession, it's because they don't like independent thinking people. Okay, this is the problem with Israelites, Hebrews, Jews. Jews don't like to conform. Hebrews, shepherds don't conform. They're independent. This goes all the way back to Hevel, Abel, right? What makes Hevel an interesting character is that he is already defiant of God. God has not permitted the consumption of meat. It seems that Hevel may have consumed meat because he raises sheep. He didn't raise sheep only for wool and milk. He raised sheep because at some point he realized that you could sustain yourself easily by roasting meat. Okay, so there was a certain kind of independence that was involved, and labor is much more intensive. Physical labor. I mean, I don't have shepherds to argue with here, but who works harder, the farmer of wheat or the shepherd? It seems to me that the farmer has to plow, has to seed, has to reap, has to sow, has to winnow, etc. There's much more labor intensive going on than a shepherd. The shepherd there's ingenuity in the sense that I can do less labor and get more benefit. Okay, but there seems to be a polemic. So Rachel is part of that tradition, part of that. She's independent. Okay. Next. So now we'll get to this verse. This, as I mentioned before, it's a beautifully rich verse. Now it was when Yaakov saw Rachel, Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother, that Yaakov came close. He rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and gave drink to the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother. Okay, well, you don't have to be a poet or a scholar to get the how the chime is going on in your head here. Why is the narrator repeating all of this? Why is and look at the elements here. We have it says his Yaakov is mentioned twice. Rachel is mentioned once. Lavan is mentioned 3 times. His mother is mentioned 3 times. So this kind of tells you, even statistically, who's important in the story. The mother and the father are important elements of the story. Yaakov comes in second, and Rachel comes in third. Okay, and the repetition of all these elements is trying to signal to us, the listener, that all of these people have certain origins. Okay, so it's when Yaakov sees Rachel, he is Yaakov, the son of his mother, and she is and she is part of a world that belongs to Lavan. It's the sheep of Lavan, the brother of his mother, the brother of his mother. So these elements are repeated. But then we get to the next verse, and what happens in the next verse? It says, then Yaakov kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Vayishak Yaakov leRachel vayisa et kolo vayek. And we correctly noted that this was quite a bold move on Yaakov's part. But, and here, this is my little literary point here, which is, how does he kiss her and how is she kissed? Who is present in the kiss? Well, the parents are not present in the kiss. Okay, this is a moment between the two of them. And I think that literarily, this is nicely accomplished, that the previous verse gives us all their relationships and the complexity of everything, the sheep, their belonging, their backgrounds. But here, and here it's nice cinematography, right? We're just in on, they're in the scene. They're the shot before this shot is the shot of the well and the family and the whole kind of setting. But the kiss is just the two of them on the screen. Okay, and that's what this is about. Vaishak Yaakov LeRachel. He kisses her, and it's on the one hand, it's a very impetuous, very bold of him. There is a certain romantic quality to this. Why is it that he is lifting up his voice and weeping? What's the content of the crying here? Why is he? What's the emotion? Can you just give me your take on why he gets so emotional? What's happening here?
Oh, he's very, very happy.
He's either very happy
He's
or very sad.
He he was lucky. He got to the right place with the right people. I was wondering though why you didn't highlight Son.
Son, yes. I thought about that, and I should have highlighted it, and I'm glad you mentioned it. You know, so consider it highlighted in the sense that it's part of the scene, but when they kiss, it's not part of the scene. So for my next time I do this class, I'll highlight it. Okay, yeah. So another point that I want to make about this is that, you know, we have in our minds, and, you know, it's just 2 weeks ago that we read the story of Isaac and Rebekah. Well, it was the servant that sees Rebekah, and the servant sees Rebekah after a long prayer and a whole journey and a beautiful story, and, you know, I love that story, etc. And he doesn't cry there, but here Jacob has nothing, and the rabbis do talk about this, that, you know, in the previous iteration of this kind of event, you know, the servant comes with a caravan, he's loaded up with gold and silver. It's a whole big to do. And here's Yaakov, he's by himself. He literally has just his staff. He has nothing, not a penny with him. And so part of this is, I'm weeping because I do see some of the past here. I do see, you know, there's a catharsis here, but, and and you get the sense that something magical has happened because she's the daughter of Lavan, and he immediately understands that they're being brought together. But he's also saying, what have I got to show for myself? Nothing. I can't offer her marriage. I can't do anything for her. Bob, go ahead.
Question and a comment. In the Hebrew, is this weeping the same or a different word than Esau when he was weeping? And what does this weeping mean? Or what are the possible interpretations of the weep?
The possible interpretations are, like, I want to say, all of the above. There's catharsis here, there's anguish here, there's sadness here, there's exhilaration here, there's elation, there's fulfillment. There, you know, one ought to be very careful as to, you know, how to, you know, splice out different specific things in such an evocative moment. You know, in counseling people who experience emotional moments like this, and I suppose I could say this as a truism for all of us whenever we experience things, is that you're never only crying about one thing, right? When you're in pain, and when you have this deep emotional reaction, it's never one thing. Sometimes it's the whole gamut. It's the whole Samsonite collection of your luggage, right? Because, you know, when the dam breaks, when a person, you know, just reaches that point where they break down and cry, there may be one trigger to that, of course, but it's usually not only one thing. And I would just add in a kind of parenthesis about now, you know, one of the things that is being experienced now in Israel, especially now, in the concentric circles around the atrocities and the concentric circles around all of the difficulties, is that the emotions are so intense, and they do go from sadness and anger and real exasperation and frustration and desolation to tremendous emotions of pride. And in one of our earlier classes, on the Tuesday class, I talked about this idea that people are experiencing intense emotions and have a tremendous emotional ecology in which there's a tremendous variety. And so, I want to be as sympathetic to Jacob as possible and say that it could be everything, including, the memory of how he got there, which is, he stole. Go ahead.
So my follow-up is, what is Rachel feeling at this point in time?
Nice.
And if we fast forward it to now, I could see a report of a Me Too accusation coming out in the press. And in fact, does this indicate as a shepherdess that it's less about independence and more about interdependence and acquiescence, and that she acquiesces in the situation?
Well, it's a good. I'm not gonna quibble with imagination, because we're all entitled to imagining things. What I would say is that as a woman, she's probably very vulnerable here, and she's probably had to fend off advances in the past, since she is reportedly a beautiful woman, and she's around men. I'm thinking, as you mentioned, Me Too. So a few weeks ago, like a month ago, when the world was a different world. So in moments of frivolity, I watched the documentary about Mary Tyler Moore, and watched a couple of episodes of the Mary Tyler Moore show before they started charging for it, which I don't want to pay for. So I watched some free episodes. So that just you couldn't get away with that today. The way they talk to her, the way they treat her, the way they touch her, you could never produce a show like that today without getting slammed by any. It wouldn't be even funny. It wouldn't be entertaining at all. The norms have changed in terms of how one is expected or to behave, how men are expected to behave around women, and especially in what that show is trying to do, which is, here's a professional woman who's single, who is independent, and has to live in a world where men sometimes behave properly and sometimes behave like imbeciles, and that in the 70s was humorous. Today, you couldn't even touch that with, it's so radioactive. Okay, John, go ahead.
I think to see the impulsiveness and the great emotion of Jacob is a little surprising to me, because we've all, at least I always thought of him as very calculating, always trying to figure out what to do. And here it seems like it's instinctive.
I think that's, if we were to graph his character development, so this is certainly a moment where there is a change in his character, because there is a calculation, certainly in the early stories, but look what he's lost, and look at him now. He's alone. Alone means no parents. I mean, he's in the chronology of the Bible, he's 40 years old, so he should be fully formed as an adult, but he's not, because he has no, we have no evidence of any kind of adult relationships here. So in a sense, there's a whole new experience that he is having, including a re-encounter with himself, and this is going to be a theme that will now accompany him throughout the rest of his life, because he is he's going to have these experiences with Lavan, in which he's going to be very tempestuous at the critical point that's also in this parsha. He will have experiences with his children, and then in a few weeks, he'll have the loss of Joseph, I'm sorry, which makes him inconsolable, completely inconsolable. And then, spoiler alert, since we've read this dozens of times, by the time he gets to Egypt, he comes off not as a particularly happy or joyful fellow. He's quite morose, and really, he's formidable in the sense that he hangs on to life, but he's darker. There's a darker element. This is not a happy person, we'll say. So this is the moment where a lot of his emotional life does change. Okay, go ahead, Toby. I'm sorry. No, Milan, I'm sorry.
Can you focus on the verse that God saw that Leah is being hated, so and Rachel is being loved, and he gave Leah the possibility to have children, and he made Rachel childless.
Okay.
Why is Rachel being in a way punished or something?
That's true. Let me see if I got that here.
Coming up. One more.
Yes. Okay. So Vayar Adonai kisnua leila vayiftach et rachma v'rachel akara. Okay. So I mean, you're honing in on the central tension of the story, which is and just to recall. So he cheats Yaakov out of Rachel. Leah is married instead. He tells Yaakov to wait a week to give Leah the kavod, the respect of a bride, and then after that week, he marries Rachel off to her not in any kind of celebratory way, but the deal is made for another 7 years, and so it says, Vayavo gam el Rachel. He came, and it should say also to Rachel, and this is not euphemistically about sex, that there had already been a consummation of the marriage with Leah. He slept with Leah. That's how he found out that it was Leah, because he woke up next to her the following morning and goes, "Oh my God, you're not the woman I thought I married." Okay, and so there was consummation between Jacob and Leah, and now it says he marries Rachel, vayavo gam el Rachel. So he, I guess, also consummated with Rachel, vayehav gam et Rachel. He loved Rachel also, and that tells us something. Is that is it the gam here by Yahav gam et Rachel? Is it he also loves her in addition to Leah? Is he loving Leah at this point, or is he being loyal to Rachel at this point? It does raise a lot of questions. But Yahav gam et Rachel mi Leah, he loves her more than Leah. So he loves her more than that. Now, God sides with the underdog here. God, it's really not fair, because God is always choosing one over the other. But I guess God doesn't like it when humans choose one over the other. And so it's not fair to her. It's not fair to Leah that she is so hated. Okay? And this might be a veiled criticism of Jacob, because on the one hand, yes, we understand that he loves Rachel, but does he have to hate Leah? Does he have to hate her? can't he, I want to close the screen for a second and ask this question, which is, okay, so we can't relate to polygamy, okay? But do you have to be such a blankety blank? Do you have to, she's your wife. You try a little bit to be a nice guy. Try be a mensch. You have to be so it seems gratuitous, and that's I don't know if that's what you were pointing out, Alana, but I'm getting the
No,
sense
I'm pointing out that why it's like he made it that Leah will have children and Rachel will not.
because God,
It's like connected.
yes.
Why doesn't he do something to Jacob, not to Rachel?
So we don't have time to go through the naming. So this she gets compensation for being hated, and Leah thinks that, okay, so having children will make him love her, and you see, it's such a very powerful human story of what this woman needs. She of course wants to be a mother. That is the primary value here. But she wants to be loved. She wants to be adored. She wants to be respected. And why shouldn't she? She doesn't want to be treated as an object. She doesn't want to be treated as a baby machine. And he's treating her in that way. Look, the scene, again, I've talked about cinematography here, and I think Anita Diamond in the red tent has this kind of beautiful, I couldn't finish the book. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to offend everybody, but she's got this pretty well laid out in her imagination, where this one has her tent, this one has her tent. And in a sense, we do have that idea. It comes later that each one of these women have their own tents. Where does Jacob spend most of his evenings? Well, he spends most of his evenings with Rachel. And she, he enjoys her as a wife. He loves her as a wife, and he can't stand Leah. And yet he's married to her. So she's alone. And that's a rivalry, and that's terrible. That's awful, awful tension between the two sisters. It's just such a horrible, horrible relationship. As compensation for that, God, who is, hovering above, sees how despised she is, and I guess, she's not totally despised, because they do have sex from time to time. And so she produces offspring. Not only does she produce offspring, she produces male offspring. And so in naming each one of the male offspring, she says, now my husband will love me. Now God saw, Reuven, God saw my woe. Shimon, God heard my plea. Levi, now that I have 3 children, God, my husband will join me, because she's got 2 children, 2 babies, one in each arm. So there's a 3rd child here. Now my husband will join me. And then Yehuda, like the 4th child, now I'm grateful. Now I have gratitude. And so there, you get the sense that maybe, Yaakov will soften his attitude towards Leah. And, if you drink a glass of wine, you can be a little sympathetic to him. Maybe he becomes more sympathetic to her. Look, fast forward to next week when Rachel dies, and he's got Leah and the 2 concubines, and he's quite desolate. But at least he's got the presence of comforting women in his life, to the extent that he is comforted by them. He may or may not be, So when you think about it, it's horrible. It's a horrible situation,
But still, I'm sorry, but
yeah.
why did Rachel have to be childless?
Why did Rachel have to be childless?
I mean, it's like I don't want to say like it's a punishment, but
No.
I know it's not. But
so I want to say, a stupid answer, which is because, but no, look, all the matriarchs it follows a certain typology. Sarah, Rebecca, here Rachel. And throughout the Bible, we'll have other encounters with Akarot, Chana, the mother of Shmuel. She cannot have child. The mother of Shimshon, Manoach, she cannot have child. And there may be other I think there are 9 examples of this in the entire Bible. And so it follows a typology, and that's a good way to move to the next piece here, because these stories do have a certain pattern to them. And I'll just so this is I'm just going to go through the first 4 children, and so I'll talk about this in a second. With when it says Rachel saw that she could not bear children to Yaakov, Rachel envied her sister. So here the table is turned on Rachel, that she's loved, but she has tremendous envy now, because she's barren, childless. She said to Yaakov, "Hava li vanim ve'im ayin meta anochi." Come now, give me children, if not, I will die. Yaakov's anger flared up against Rachel and said, "Am I in place of God, who's denied you the fruit of the belly?" She said, "Here's my slave girl. Like, take her, come into her." I mean, it's pretty gross, that she may give birth upon my knees, so that I may too be built up with sons through her. And she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife, and Yaakov came to her, and Bilhah became pregnant. In all of these stories, Abraham has no problem, when they give him Hagar, okay, no problem. And Jacob has no problem when Bilhah is there. And it just goes to show, in this intense, environment, there are all sorts of complicated relationships between this man and 4 women. There are 4 women around here who are all kind of vying for attention. They're all competing for attention from him. And she's a slave, but Rachel is saying, I want to elevate this slave to be a kind of concubine to you, because I want a child. And I will follow the example that was set by your grandmother. Your grandmother did this with your grandfather. Your grandmother, Sarah, gave your grandfather Abraham Hagar. So if it was good enough for her, it's good enough for me. And go have a good time. I want a child, right? It's pretty whatever. So I made this point here that it's a long time that this jealousy is building up here. There are 4 births, so think about it, 9 months, for a pregnancy. So how quick after a pregnancy does Leah become pregnant again? Who knows? 40 months, 36 months, maybe more than that. It's a long time. Did the envy come after the 4th birth, or was it growing all along? So then she says, "Give me children now. If not, I will die." So I like this comment by Robert Alter, and he says as follows: "It is a general principle of biblical narrative that a character's first recorded speech has a particularly defining force as characterization." This is the first thing she says. Okay. Surprisingly, although Rachel has been part of the story for more than a decade of narrated time, this is the first piece of dialogue assigned to her. It is a sudden revelation of her simmering frustration and her impulsivity. In fact, she speaks with an impetuousness reminiscent of her brother-in-law Esau, who also announces to Jacob that he was on the point of death if Jacob did not immediately give him what he wanted. It's a brilliant comment. I love that comment. He made such a brilliant insight that what is she? There's a certain impulsivity in her, right? And we have not seen it in her speech yet, but if you just kind of rewind the tape and go back to the well, there's something there. She's been, Leah is very passive, but Rachel has been off screen with everything she said. She hasn't said anything, not because there hasn't been any communication. It's just because we're waiting for this moment to present her in this way. Present her with anger, present her with impetuousness, present her with impulsivity, and present her with the idea, I have to move the story forward, because that's what Bible characters do, right? They don't just wait for God to act. They need to take matters into their own hands, and that's exactly what she does. Everything will fit into the plan afterwards, but she has a certain impulsivity here, which is akin to the impulsivity of her brother-in-law, who she doesn't know, Esav, and will remind all of us this, and she catastrophizes to the extent that she says, I'm going to die. Look, if I don't have children, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Okay. I'm going to do a couple more things here. All right. So Yaakov's anger flared up at her, right? And he says, am I in place of God who has denied you the fruit of the belly? It's a horrible thing to answer, right? You would expect, the loving husband to say, it's okay. Right? Oh, I know, whatever I could do. I'll we'll go to a doctor, we'll go to this, there must be some folk remedy. We'll pray, we'll go to an oracle like I'll pray for you like my father prayed for me, that kind of thing. And he says, through Jacob's word, the writer shrewdly invokes a faithful deflection of the Annunciation type scene. A little bit highfalutin here. Annunciation is the announcement of a child, okay? According to the convention of an Annunciation story, and this, of course, belongs to those kinds of stories, the barren wife should go to an oracle or be visited by a divine messenger or a man of God to be told that she will give birth to a son. Every other story, almost, Rebecca went to an oracle. Manoach's wife, she goes and there's an angel that appears to her. And Hannah gets a message from Eli, the high priest. There's always someone interceding and saying, and it's always someone who is like godly, okay? It's very interesting that the barren woman will turn to God. Rachel, there's nobody there for her, okay? So Rachel instead importunes her husband. You be my oracle, and then he answers, what do you think I am, God? Right? I can't do that. I can't play the role of God in the bestowal of fertility or in the Annunciation narrative. Rachel is then forced to fall back on the strategy of surrogate maternity, Sarah to Hagar. One should note that she demands sons, not a son. Eventually she will have two sons, but will die giving birth to the second one. Perhaps her rash words here, give me sons, for if you don't, I'm dead woman, are meant to foreshadow her premature death. Okay, so Rachel is always acting with initiative. She proposes her handmaiden to solve her fertility. She doesn't turn to an oracle. Later, she will play. We have other examples of how she's very, she follows a certain tradition of strong, impulsive women. Okay, she is the wife of Jacob that meets at the well even before it gets to Haran, the destination. She's always providing a human intervention in the unfolding of it. So in the stories of barren women, there are certain main characteristics, certain main elements in the stories. Okay, you have, and we don't have time to really go into it. The point is that this follows the pattern, but it's slightly different from the pattern. Okay. There are certain things that are consistent and certain things that are missing. An intervention and an actual miracle, that's missing. I go to Grossman, Jonathan Grossman, I like him very much these days, so he's saying like so. There are those who say that the absence of prayer in the story is an implicit critique of Rachel. However, it appears to me that we should understand the absence of this literary element as a totally different significance. In the end, when Rachel is remembered, she gives birth to Joseph, who is destined to be the provider for the entire nation of Egypt and sustain his family. In this regard, Joseph functions as the leader of his family who is concerned about his survival. The absence of this element of prayer or any kind of intervention is not intended to critique Rachel or judge her actions, but to give us some kind of foreshadowing of the son that will be born to her. It tells us of her independence. Immediately, okay, so then I have a midrash, but we're not going to have a chance to do that. Let me conclude with this and say as follows. We meet her and we have a certain kind of mirror of Jacob. Jacob is filled with emotion and crying. She doesn't really know what's happening. She's, it seems, passive at the moment that they meet at the well. And she's passive when it comes to the whole marriage. She really doesn't have control over anything. But she tries to take control of situation in a moment of intense grief and an intense feeling of emotion and jealousy. And Jacob, his reaction to her, am I God? Am I under God? Am I, that's a reaction that's very angry, and it's also, I think, an impulsive reaction. I like the idea that that Robert Alter's comment that she is making him into that person, and he's saying, I'm not that person. I'm not a man of God, right? I think that's very clever. So what you then see is a marriage. So I want to ask this question, which is this a good marriage? It's a loving marriage? Or is it a difficult marriage? Is she, is she lovable, or is she not? Or is she allowed to be? Is she not allowed? I mean, what would be your characterization of this moment? And when spouses fight like this, does it signify a breakdown, or does it signify some kind of their intensity, the intensity of their relationship and independence? I'm going to ask you that question. So what do you think? Do you think that this intense blow up that he has with her is because he loves her, or is because he's just like, enough, I can't take it anymore? What would you think? Go ahead, Ruth.
Well, simply the fact that he had two wives, I mean, that's tension right there. I mean, how can you have two wives and they're not going to be equal? I mean, presumably when you have multiple children, the children are equal, except not in the Torah, but I mean, in real life, they should be. But two wives, it's like, it's just impossible. So, I mean, that's going to be tension right there, because they're going to, whether they outwardly argue with each other or just simmer quietly, is not going to work.
Okay, so look, I mean, I'm not fully up on the polyamorous, polyandry, whatever. We have all sorts of different models of relationships that exist even to this day. There are people with open marriages and all that kind of thing, and you just have to read the Sunday Times to get samples of this. They exist. They go into the situation, as you say, with some real disparity in the relationship, and I think this is a critical moment. Also, this is a critical moment of transition, because it's at this point, eventually she will have a child. She will have a child, and their relationship will change. I'm still tempted to even say this. I remember on a previous iteration of this class, or just some comments, I came across someone interpreting the fact, I even kind of hinted it in last week's Parasha sheet, that you have many examples of characters in the Bible with multiple wives, at least two wives. So you have last week Esav with two wives. He has three wives, actually, but before he marries the third wife, which is the daughter of Ishmael, he has two wives from the children of Het, the sons of Het. Okay, one of them, Yehudit, doesn't have any children, and then you have, going all the way back to Lemech, which is in the generations of Cain. Lemech has two wives, Ada and Tzila. Okay, and reading very carefully there, one of them has children, one of them doesn't have children, until that second one does have children. So the archetype here is the two wives, one for childbearing and one for sex, basically. The childbearing woman will lose her attractiveness over time, depending on how the toll of her pregnancies are. I mean, that may or may not be true necessarily, but you know, for women who experiences it, you know, it does do something to your body, of course. So the wife who doesn't have children will retain a certain level of physical attractiveness to the husband for a longer duration, okay? And this seems to be what, you know, something going on here. Well, Rachel she's not interested in that at all. She's interested in being a mother. And too bad, you know, I don't want to be that wife for you. I don't want to be your trophy wife. I want to be a mother of children. I want to be, you know, the mother of this nation. I mean, to the extent that she's aware of that is debatable, but she understands that her role is not to be just a piece of furniture, right? And it, you know, as opposed to Leah, who she would like that kind of role. She would like to have the role where she is adored, and she, you know, he's affectionate to her because he loves her and he's attracted to her. But instead, there's no love, there's no attraction, and nothing. Rachel is beautiful. He loves her. He's attracted to her, but she's not interested in that. And that's kind of what's going on here. Okay. Oh my God, do we have any other? I didn't get in trouble when I said any of that. Good. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so since I'm neither a marital or family therapist, I'm going to dodge your question about whether this is a good or a bad marriage.
Yes.
It's
okay.
probably a mixture of both.
Sure.
But more to the point for me is, what are the challenges that are being represented? And the fact that they can have a dialogue is already the possibility for improvement. And so here I will just draw on a comment. If Abraham represents Chesed and Yitzhak represents Din, then in fact, are they not both wrestling together with the question of Chesed and Din in this dialogue as they try to, on both sides, figure out what their relationship is going to be?
So exactly what they're, you know, we'd have to look at what is the Sephirah, the mystical attribute of Jacob. Jacob is, do you recall? I don't recall it offhand. You know, are they wrestling with you know, chesed, love and judgment? I don't know. I would say that you know, we have these characters here they're living with real disappointments and real emotions and real circumstances, and what's interesting is that there's a big story that they're a part of. They live inside a big story where each and every decision changes the outcome of the big story. And at this moment, they can't see the big story. The big story is the foundation of the people of Israel. But the story for them is, my husband doesn't sleep with me, and my husband's not attracted to me, and I can't have children. And when you are living in that story, you don't see the big story. You only see your own pain and your own anguish and the challenges in front of you and the decisions that you have to make, you know, that may or may not have tremendous ramifications, but you have to make decisions about how you're going to live. And so the grand plan, you know, we could ascribe to them the sense that they have awareness of this, but I want to live inside the story and see, you know, what they're experiencing, and what they're experiencing is some intense rivalry and emotion all together. So, all right, well, we'll have to leave it there. Usual, can't talk about these things enough. They're just you know, too rich for the time we have. But I invite you to spend more time.
Why many wives and not many husbands?
There you go. That's what we
That's it. I'm just saying it.
That's right.